there's a number of trials ongoing right now that are evaluating a novel mechanism-based therapeutic with ruxolitinib in the JAK inhibitor-naive patient population. So we've seen drugs like navitoclax, the BCL-2/XL inhibitor, come through with really actually nice results, but sort of failing on that key total symptom score at 24 weeks. Pelabresib, the pan-BET inhibitor, also really great data, but not quite hitting that TSS at the 24 weeks. And now we have a trial called the SENTRY study, which is selinexor, the XPO1 inhibitor, which is actually an approved therapeutic for myeloma and B-cell malignancies, but repositioned towards myelofibrosis because it does have certain MOAs that are relevant to the pathobiology of the disease and has pretty interesting and compelling phase 1 study in a relatively small number of patients, but took notice, very significant spleen and symptom response and tolerability that then provided the confidence to go into a large randomized phase 3 study. So the SENTRY study is an ongoing global effort to evaluate selinexor plus ruxolitinib versus ruxolitinib plus placebo in JAK inhibitor-naive patients. And most recently, an interesting development in that study as it continues to move on is a change in some of the endpoints. So the primary endpoint remains spleen volume response, which has sort of been standard. And now the other primary endpoint or key endpoint is reduction in mean absolute change in symptom score. So rather than sort of a binary, you either hit a TSS 50 or you don't, it sort of takes into fact that patients come to you with different symptoms and different symptom severities in each symptom, and that maybe the TSS 50 for one patient may not reflect the full benefit for another patient. Right. So looking at the mean change from baseline to week 24 may be a better way of really assessing the true impact. And what these studies are doing, SENTRY being one of them now, or probably the first one to do it, is anchoring that change to a measure like patient global impression of change, another way of determining that change between the two arms in the mean score is actually clinically relevant, that the patients appreciate that change. So I think it's exciting because it's not just exciting for the SENTRY study, which it is, but it's exciting for the field because it also indicates a willingness of the FDA to entertain endpoints and to soften the idea that it's just a binary endpoint. So I'm excited by that. I think for patients and other sponsors will likely be excited by that.
And I think from the patients that we represent, I couldn't agree more as well, because all three of those programs that you mentioned had some form of symptom score response that we had to address. And if you think fundamentally back to what myelofibrosis and MPNs are broadly, they're very heterogeneous diseases. And that means something biologically, but to the patient, from the patient experience, what that means and how that shows up is that they experience their disease very differently. Yeah. They experience their symptoms very differently, and headaches to one patient means something very different to another. Bone pain from one patient means something very different to another. So what we're most excited about is the innovation, or the evolution, I should say, of the looking at total symptom score in different ways actually acknowledges the fact that those patients experience things very differently, and we're taking a much broader lens at how we characterize those symptoms, which I'm excited about because I think that also is a precursor to the ongoing conversations we need to continue to have with the regulatory authorities about now how do we look at our endpoints even more broadly, so that we are coming back to the patient and giving them endpoints that are meaningful to them and recognize the variability in their patient experience and in their treatment journey.
Yep, absolutely. And I think from the FDA standpoint, I appreciate the fact that they are charged with an objective to allow new drugs to come forward that have tangible benefit to the patient. And spleen volume reduction alone, unless we can prove associates with survival, symptom improvement is something that I think everyone around the table agrees, and obviously patients will tell you, is really important. How to capture that is the nuance we're talking about. But what I'm also hopeful for is that the way we're looking at this will also evolve over time as we understand what these biomarkers are telling us, so that if we see that adding a drug, so ruxolitinib we know is a great symptom improving drug. It is hard to sort of improve symptoms beyond that. But I think as long as we're not worsening symptoms and adding some benefit, and then we can validate that biomarkers maybe early on are also changing the disease for later outcomes, I think it creates a nice picture where we could find pathways for it. So I'm really excited that we're hopefully moving in a more positive direction.
Yeah. And I think the momentum behind that direction comes from the entire community coming together, as you were saying earlier, that patient voice, the research and clinical community, as well as our industry leaders and the sponsors who are bringing these treatments over the finish line, are coming together to address that and try to gain some momentum to move forward that conversation with the regulatory authorities.